One of the best decisions I have made in the past decade for my businesses was back in 2019 when I made the conscious decision that I was going to start creating content around my personal brand. The reason that this was so powerful, and it's by far one of the best decisions I've ever made. No, I'm going to say it is the best decision, besides the first decision, which was to actually get in the game of entrepreneurship. This was the second best decision because what I didn't realize in the first 7-ish years of my journey was I was building businesses, started with the windows, had the gym, had the manufacturing company, all these things where the business itself was the front-facing entity. It was the brand. And so we would attract customers to the brand delivering the product. And that's great. That's a fantastic way to build a business. But the limitation became as I exited one business and I moved to start the next one, nobody knew who I was behind the businesses because I wasn't front facing. I wasn't part of the brand image of that company. And that was by intent, but it also made it very, very difficult then to scale that next opportunity because I had to pretty much do it as though I was starting from square one. I had the knowledge and the resources, but I didn't have the certain level of, let's say, having overcome a certain level of obscurity, which would have made the game of business so much easier when people know who you are and that you have this track record and they can look to you and say like, this is what they stand for and who they are. Right. And so 2019 rolls around and I'm starting to make the decision with my business partner over at Escape that I think I'm going to be done with the day-to-day operations. And we have a team in place. Things are moving so beautifully that I'm not really needed. And so I say, I'm going to go start this new thing, which is Invictus Capital. That's our real estate private equity firm. And in conjunction with that, I'm going to start building a brand. I'm going to start putting out content. I'm going to start shaping this narrative around who I am and what I do, what I stand for, all these things. And at first it was something that I just found enjoyable. I like creating content and I like sharing my thoughts with the world. But over the last few years, I've started to see the real value of having a personal brand. And it's something that I believe everybody, regardless of what you're doing with your life, should have. I think everybody, even if you're an accountant or a lawyer or a CPA, I don't care if you're an entrepreneur or not, I think you should have a personal brand. I think you should build one with intention. And the reason for that is personal brand is nothing else other than just digital reputation. It's just what do people think of when they think about you? And we can craft that narrative. And if you're not crafting it, then they're just going to fill it in for themselves. And if you have any kind of digital online presence at the moment, then you already have a brand. You just you just don't know what it is. It just wasn't crafted with care. And the value that comes with putting out content and building your brand with intention is immensely valuable. Not just the side of it where you're learning and growing through the act of creating and putting out content, not just that you're adding value to the world and helping other people. Those are great things. But let's say you get fired tomorrow. Let's say you're a barista. Let's use this as an example. If you're a barista and you get fired tomorrow, you might just have to go and find a new coffee shop, and you're going to have to interview, and you have to give them your resume, and you have to sit down and you have to tell them about who you are and all this stuff. And hopefully you make a good impression, and then they call you back in and you get the job. Awesome. Contrast that with if you were a barista who, because of your passion with coffee beans, you started a YouTube channel. And every week you just do a podcast episode, you put out a video about your obsession with coffee, and you grow that platform and you get, a couple, maybe 1,000 followers. It's not a massive following, but these are coffee lovers. And that's a small circle of people, right? It's a niche market. And so now when you get fired from this job, let's say the business shuts down and, through no fault of your own, you're out of work. Now you go to those same coffee shops around the city, and it's between you and the other barista. Who are they more likely to hire? The person who, when you walk in, they go, I've seen your videos. Or the person that they have no clue who existed until the moment they walked in the door. That is the power of having a brand. And I was reminded of this because I got stopped on the street the other day. Walking back, I was in my slippers. It's outside. It's 20 degrees. I'm in shorts because I just finished playing tennis. And I'm wearing slippers with my coffee. And a guy stops me and he's like, dude, I love your videos. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And that is one of the side benefits of having a brand. But you can translate that into whatever you're doing to have opportunities in the future with work. And it's so damn powerful. Now, if you want to craft your brand with intention and care and you want to actually start doing this, here's 3 things I would do as an exercise to help you establish your character, because it's important to recognize your personal brand is not you, it's your persona. It's a version of you. It's not going to be everything. There's parts of you that you're going to not share. You're going to ideally share a particular variation of yourself that is consistent with what you're trying to portray. That's not to say that you're putting on a mask and you're trying to be something you're not and faking it till you make it. You show up in different contexts in life in different ways. You're a different person with your grandmother than you are with your loved one, with your spouse, than you are with the boys at the bar, right? And that's how we have to think about our personal brand. Like, who are you showing up with as when you're in brand mode? So the first question I ask is, what's your backstory? Where'd you come from? What's your origin? And figuring out the narrative that you tell that helps weave the understanding of how you got to this place in your life. That's super important, because you lived a very wide, varied life. You've done a ton of different interesting things with yourself. You have to be able to craft a concise but cohesive narrative that helps people understand how you got from where you were to here. And the best way to do this is typically to find a low point in your life, some kind of transformation, so you can go from being the underdog to who you are at this moment. It doesn't have to be that you've won the game or anything like that, that you're at the top of the mountain. It has to be some kind of, I used to be this and now this is how I got here. Like, what are those inciting incidents, those things that happened in your life that put you inexorably on the path towards this moment? If you've listened to my podcast for any length of time, you are probably familiar with a lot of my origin stories, right? I share the fact that my fiance left me at 28. I was back of the van, $80,000 in debt. But guys, I was 28. That wasn't the start of my story. That's just where I started the story. You see the difference? And that's what you have to do. And it's hard because you have done so many different things. Trust me, I tried out dozens of versions of my origin story before I really figured out, okay, what's the core? When did it really start? Like, what part is the part that my audience is going to find the most value in and resonate with as I tell the story from that moment forward? That's the tricky part, but you have to figure out what's your backstory. Number 2 is, what are the 3 characteristics that you want to be associated with your content? Come up with 3 words. For myself, some words that come to mind, but that I write. These are my 3 words, actually. I'll just share them with you. So the 3 things that I strive for in all my content is to be authentic, to be engaging, and to be insightful. And so whenever I create something, I come into it and I say, these are like my benchmarks. Am I being authentic? To be authentic, it usually requires being bold, fearless, and vulnerable. It's a really interesting mix of things. Bold, fearless, and vulnerable. That's what means being authentic to me, at least. It might not be the same to you, but I know if I show up and I'm being bold with what I'm sharing, I'm being fearless about showing myself as how I really am, and then being vulnerable and sharing those parts of myself that are maybe uncomfortable to share because I haven't necessarily fully reconciled those parts of myself. That's how I show up authentically. I try to be engaging with my content. So I want you to be entertained. I don't want this just to be a lecture. I don't want this just to be being shouted at. I want this to be engaging. I want you to feel like your time is being well spent. And then I want it to be insightful. I want you to walk away with something that changes or influences or helps you see the world in maybe a slightly different way, or just a way that you'd already seen, but just to help you remember that. And so those are 3 things that I want my content to be known for: insightful, engaging, authentic. But for you, that might be, I want it to be funny. I want it to be intellectual. I want it to be empathetic. Like, it could be all sorts of things, but it's important that you narrow down what are those characteristics that define you as a brand. Once you've done that, then you can move to the third question, which is, what are the 3 to 5 topics that you're going to talk about? And I think more than those, like 3 to 5 topics, and you really start running the risk of like confusing your audience and going a little bit too broad and too wide. You know, some people will say you need to niche down and just be known for one thing. I think that's too narrow. I think you're an interesting person. You've done a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that you're passionate about. You're not just one of those. And so that's why I talk about entrepreneurship. I talk about real estate investing. I talk about storytelling. I talk about ADHD and my pursuit of like personal mastery, right? There's different topics that I can weave into my content. And I think it's important to have 3 to 5 of those topics that when somebody thinks about you, they can quickly say, oh yeah, they talk about this, and this. And that just gives you more touch points to connect with your audience so they can see you as a 3-dimensional, fully formed human being, which is very hard when you just try to niche down into one thing, or when you go too broad and you're trying to share around 10 different topics every day. Like, that's too much. So start by getting your backstory nailed down. Number 2, figure out what are the 3 characteristics of your content. And then 3, what are the 3 to 5 topics that you want to create content around. Now, if you want more help with this, next month we're launching Beyond the Apex community and storytelling, brand building. That is going to be one of the modules that we cover in that community. There's going to be a bunch of courses. We're going to cover those aspects of brand building and in there. And then there's also going to be monthly coaching, so you can get some feedback on your personal brand. If you have questions, you can bring them to the group and we will give you feedback. But that's coming up here soon. Your registration is not open yet, but the doors will be any day now, very, very soon. So hope this brings you guys some value. As always, thanks for being here. I'll catch you guys around these parts tomorrow. Until then, stay hyper focused, my friend.